Employees are the voice of your brand, and the ability to deliver on your brand promise lies in their hands. Engaged employees create real relationships between your brand and your best customers. We help you recognize and reward your employees and make business more personal.
Are bad attitudes by your staff hurting the bottom line? They might be, as there's a strong link between employee engagement levels and customer service, and that undoubtedly impacts sales. That was the consensus of a recent roundtable discussion I moderated with 6 senior business leaders, where we explored how firms measure engagement, the best tactics to increase it, and some of the pitfalls to avoid. Employee surveys have always been a popular way to measure engagement, but are these still the best tools to use? And how can they be done properly to truly gauge emotional commitment?
We do an annual associate engagement survey as well that goes out to our franchise community. We don't do it annually. We conduct the engagement survey every 2 years, and then the same, we've got action plans that we hold the franchise partners accountable to, supported by our regional ops management team. We also measure engagement through our guest feedback program, and so we get a really good gauge through our guest feedback program annually based on the amount of guest results that we get, and then through the action plans and the accountability around the action plans as we do them every couple of years.
I would say that there are other proxy forms, if you will, of measuring employee engagement, which for me are as important, if not more important. They include things like revenue per employee and profitability per employee when you benchmark that against the external marketplace, since if you are generating higher revenues and higher profits per employee, then there's an association with employees being more engaged. We also take a look at things such as regretted turnover. Not all people who leave you are necessarily a loss, but when you're losing individuals who are performing and who choose to leave you, that's sending a very clear message that there are issues with regards to engagement, amongst other things.
Because I think we're getting confused between engagement and productivity. So I think we really need to be very clear about what engagement means, because if we lose sight of productivity, we do a really good job of measuring what the actions that people have on the job description. We're really good at that. I'm not so sure we're very good at measuring outcomes. So when we look at engagement exclusively, a lot of line managers view that to be happiness, right? So we link now engagement to the line scores for managers, and maybe that's not the right thing. I mean, that becomes a popularity contest. Do the people like me that are working for me, as opposed to are they productive? So I believe in scoring, I believe in measurement. You need all those things. I just think we have to think a little deeper around what engagement means and how that links to productivity and how that links to outcomes.
There's a clear link between employee engagement scores and guest satisfaction scores, and that's one of the things that we know time and time again when we measure and we see that we've got an engagement issue that we need to address. Almost certainly there are other business metrics that are not in line with where we want to be, and guest service is one of those ones where we believe firmly that healthy, happy employees drive guest service, and which in turn drives profit.
We did a correlation with our associate engagement survey in regards to the overall guest experience and the overall satisfaction of our guests, in addition to the overall profitability for each restaurant. And if you looked at the top quartile, the highest engaged associates had the highest guest satisfaction and also the highest profitability. And when we looked at our lowest quartile, the results were uncanny. It was the same thing. And so the correlation was really helpful for us to really influence the franchise partners in the bottom quartile to really elevate the associate experience, because ultimately it was proving to drive profitability.
I think the challenge becomes, how do you drive results, which means automatically pushing people to do more, right? Versus the idea around, and I heard the language of employee satisfaction. So at what point do you dissatisfy your employees because you're driving for performance? So there's a fine line between the two, and that's a bit of an art. And so your ability to do that in organizations, in large organizations, is really tough to do.
And do it over the long term. Yeah. You know, the short term is always relatively easy do some quick fixes, but if you're going to drive it over long term.
Because you can always create a burning platform, that energizes people over the short haul. But you're right, it's absolutely the long haul that becomes, when it becomes same old, then what are you doing to stimulate the sort of performance you're looking for?
Engagement scores can go up with the introduction of new programs or an improved culture, or they can go down thanks to issues such as a toxic environment, bad leadership, or a lack of follow-through from HR. Our roundtable participants discuss some of the reasons behind rising or falling engagement scores at their companies.
When we look at our annual survey results, there's some recurring themes both at the central office and the store level. So 3 key things that come to mind are recognition, career development, and performance management. And if we think about those, they're typically tied to leadership effectiveness. So one of our big areas of focus is on developing our leaders to make sure that they're strong in these areas and can help drive engagement up. As to what might erode engagement, I think one of the key points of feedback that we heard early on in our journey, and we've certainly been consistent over the past 5 years in terms of our survey methodology and reporting on results, was that there was some skepticism that, would management actually do anything with these results? And I think the worst thing that anyone can do is survey employees and then not show action. So that certainly can erode results. So we put a big focus on having those engagement action plans and actually reporting out on an annual basis. What did we do? We heard you, and this is what we've done. Change can erode engagement as well. So again, that focus comes down to our leaders that play a critical role in making sure that they're meeting frequently with employees, letting them know they're valued, that we want them to stay, and having those retention discussions. So it all really comes down to leadership.
Just to build on that, I think it's really important to deal with elephants in the room. Nothing kills employee engagement faster than where employees see and talk about something that is wrong. It can be an individual who has a toxic nature. It can be an individual who is not upholding the core values of the organization. It can be an individual who, frankly, is doing something criminal, and that activity is allowed to continue. Because what it then says to the organization or parts of the organization is that leaders are not walking the talk. On the flip side, one of the things that really does help to build employee engagement is honest, frank, transparent communication. So when you try to hide things, when you try to paint a rosy picture when there are issues that have to be addressed, employees are too intelligent and too connected to not be talking with one another and not be thinking about what the reality is. Better to be honest and share the news, good, bad, or indifferent.
It comes back to the integrity of leadership. And if you start with that foundation of trust and belief that the leaders that they are working with are actually acting in the best interest of the company and the plan, then you start with a great foundation. And when we do have missteps, we can honestly say, oops, that didn't go the way we had planned. Yeah. Course correct, and people will say, okay, got it, understood. We all make mistakes, and we all have times when a plan doesn't quite work the way we thought. If you've got an underlying integrity and trust, I think people will accept when there's a misstep once in a while.
And it's good to show vulnerability.
Absolutely.
That builds trust too. So we do make mistakes all the time as a leadership team. And so course correcting and declaring, yeah, we screwed up, and righting the wrong is okay. That drives engagement versus ignoring it or not doing anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were... the leadership is such a foundational part of it, and speaking to the authenticity of leaders is huge, and having leaders, we're talking about outcomes, and having leaders really role model the behaviors that they're looking for from the employee population is huge.
But there's another angle to this that we haven't thought about, and that's the demographics, and that the demographics demand different things. So if you think of Generation Y, they're looking for interesting work. So as you start to think what engages them might be different from the boomers. And so the idea, again, of nuances around how you engage those people are different. And that means you need to be really thoughtful, because one size doesn't fit all, one program doesn't fit all. So it's the tweaks that you do and all of the associated things that go with it ultimately drive the engagement.